Hello MTG friends, welcome back to the final episode of my favorite cards of 2022. Today we are going to be going through the last few cards on my list, all of the Mythics that I thought were worth talking about. We're going to start off with the Ancient Dragon cycle, the Mythics out of Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. I'm going to be covering 4 of these as I did not feel that the green one, the Ancient Bronze Dragon, was particularly interesting compared to the other 4. So we're going to start with Ancient Brass Dragon. For 5 black, you get a 7/6 flyer. When it deals damage to a player, you roll a d20, and then you put any number of target creature cards with mana value X or less from any graveyard, any number of graveyards even. You can pick 3 different graveyards, where X is the result. So this is huge dragon, huge mana cost, but you get a 7/6 flyer, so it's a little evasive. Then when you slap somebody, you get to reanimate anywhere from 1 mana value to 20 mana value. I think this is really significant. Great card. Next, we have one of the most important cards of the year, Ancient Copper Dragon. This card, just look at the price disparity between brass and copper, and even gold and silver. Copper Dragon is $65, maybe a little less on TCG, but on Card Kingdom, this thing is $65 just for the base version of this card. And this is why. 6 mana, so 4 red for a 6/5 flyer. It deals combat damage, you roll a d20, you make that number of treasures. This is old Gnawbone all over again, but potentially better. It's got, a very low floor. You can roll a 1, but on average you're getting anywhere from 8 to 12 treasures. That's really significant, and there's a reason this card is so highly valued. It's very good, even if it is a little battle cruisery. We have Ancient Gold Dragon next. It's a 7/10 flyer for 5 white. When it deals combat damage to a player, you roll that d20, you make a number of 1/1 blue fairy dragons. I think this card is really great as well, getting a huge bunch of tokens. I'd say it's right in the same ballpark as the Brass Dragon here. The last one we're going to talk about is Ancient Silver. 6 blue for an 8/8 flyer. You roll a d20 when it deals damage, you draw cards equal to the result, and you have no maximum hand size for the entire rest of the game. Very significant card. I think that mass amount of card draw is really great, but just giving you a permanent no maximum hand size is also just kind of significant just for connecting once, especially if you're in a draw-heavy deck. Next, we have Angel of Suffering out of New Capenna. This is a super cool protection piece. It is 3 black for a Nightmare Angel. It's a 5/3 with flying. If damage would be dealt to you, prevent it, but mill twice those cards. Wow. So this is one of the best self-mill cards ever printed. It serves, like I said, as excellent, just absolutely amazing protection for you. And it can run infinitely in the right decks if it's well protected. If you can keep your Angel of Suffering around and you're playing cards like the Eldrazi Titans, the Shuffle Titans, you don't take damage as long as you can keep your Angel out, because your deck is going to keep getting shuffled, back into your deck. Your graveyard's going back every single time. And you just don't take damage anymore. I play this in my Gitrog Monster combo deck. It's not quite CEDH level, but it's about as close as you can get without turning it into a CEDH optimized deck. And Angel of Suffering never fails to be a massive house. With Gitrog out, you're drawing a card every time you mill through those cards as well. It's super easy to survive massive swings. Yeah, you don't take damage. It's crazy. We have Arcane Bombardment next. This is a super fun enchantment for spells decks, like Spellslinger decks. It does a whole lot to get your stuff back over and over. So for 4 red, it's an enchantment. And you cast your first instant or sorcery each turn. Exile an instant or sorcery at random from your graveyard. Then you can copy each card exiled with Arcane Bombardment and cast them for free. It's so funny. It's so powerful. I like cards and decks that encourage you in, like red and blue. Is it kind of spellslingy decks to not have to run a bunch of counterspells? And I think Arcane Bombardment is in a place where you don't even have to run counterspells in this deck quite as much in order to get a ton of value. But it also does fantastic things for decks that do run counterspells by turning something as simple as an opt into a counterspell if you've exiled one under Arcane Bombardment. Just imagine your opponent goes to play a big card. They don't think you have any counterspells in hand. You cast Opt. You exile a counterspell out of your graveyard by chance with the Bombardment earlier in the game. And now every single time you cast a spell, the first time each turn, you get to counter something as well as all of these other effects that you've exiled under your Bombardment. Card's super cool. Very fun. Very exciting. Next, we have Arcane Proxy out of Bro. 7 mana or 1 blue if you prototype it, for either a 4/3 unprototyped or a 2/1 prototyped. When it enters, if you cast it, exile an instant or sorcery with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard, copy it, and cast it for free. This is the most interesting, weird little flexible take on Snapcaster Mage that I've seen in a while. It loses the flash of Snapcaster, but what it gains is this flexible level of power. It lets you pick the things that you want to be able to grab out of your graveyard, anywhere from 2 to 4. Well, 0 to 4, I suppose. Giving you that flexibility of paying either 3 or 7. You get the card for free, so you don't have to worry about the flashback. And if you have effects that are pumping your artifact creatures on board, it could even go a little bit higher. Arcane Proxy is incredibly flexible. It feels very, very powerful to boot. I'm really interested in testing this card out in a few decks. Next, we have Awaken the Woods. This is one of my favorite cards of the year. It's also one of the best ramp spells we've ever seen. This is incredibly flexible. It simply costs X green. It's a sorcery, and it says make X 1/1 forest dryad land creature tokens. You make a bunch of dryad arbors, and it's so flexible. If you just want 2, 4 mana, there you go. You want 5, that's going to be 7 mana. But it scales so nicely. It has so much power. It makes bodies. It triggers your landfall over and over again, and it's really, really just easy to adjust to what you need. I'm playing this in my Grand Warlord Rada deck, which already generates a ton of mana and wants bodies on board. This gives both. Phenomenal card. We have Battle Angels of Tyr next. This is 2 white for a flying myriad 4/4. When it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card if that player has more cards in hand than each other player. Then make a treasure if that player controls more lands than each other player. And then gain 3 life if that player has more life than each other player. What's amazing about this card is that myriad effect. If all 3 of them get through, because they are 4/4 flyers for 4, when you swing, you get 2 copies, 1 pointed to each of the other opponents. And you're almost guaranteed to get all 3 of those effects as long as you are not currently ahead. It does care about player and not just opponents. That's something really important to pay attention to. But I think this card is supremely powerful. Really, really interesting as well. All right, we have Bootlegger's Stash next. This gets the award for the most overhyped card of the year, I think. This card was pre-ordering for $40 to $60. This card is now $10 on Card Kingdom. Even less for the foil, which says to me that it's still on its way down. But this is 5 and a green for an artifact that gives your lands tap, create a treasure token. Just because this card was overhyped, though, doesn't mean this isn't a phenomenal Magic the Gathering card. Yes, it's 6 mana, so you better be prepared to, use that mana in a different way so that your lands can make those treasures for you. I personally, though, I play this in Ginny Fae. Turning every single one of my unused lands for the turn into either a cat or dog token rather than just a treasure token is ridiculous, and I still have that option to turn them into treasures if I so desire to get some mana ramping going. This card's really cool, especially in decks that can ramp this out quickly. I'm a big fan of the stash. Alright, we're going to Cityscape Leveler next. This is an 8 mana 8/8 with Trample. It's an artifact creature construct. When you cast it and whenever it attacks, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent, and its controller makes a tapped Power Stone token in exchange. Getting to wipe a permanent and just hand a tapped Power Stone is disgusting. What a horrible trade for your opponents. Trample and Unearth just make this even more insane. The fact that this is getting through, some level of damage as an 8/8. You get an on-cast trigger, so even if it gets countered, you're getting something. And for 8 mana, you can bring it back out of your grave later. I will note you don't get the cast trigger if you unearth this. Unearthing is not casting, but since it'll have haste, you will get that one final destruction when you swing with your giant 8/8 anyway. Cityscape Leveler is a massive threat, and if you are in need of a way to blank your opponent's permanents, that aren't lands, of course, the Leveler is a really cool way to do it. This is like Meteor Golem, but just better in almost every single way. One thing I will note, though, is unlike the rest of my list that I've been going on and on about this year, or this this set of videos, Cityscape Leveler is not a great blink target. I'm sad to report. All right, we're moving on next to our first Planeswalker. We're going to be talking about Comet, Stellar Pup. For 2 red-white, you get a legendary Planeswalker named Comet. He has 5 loyalty when he enters, and for 0, you roll a 6-sided dice. If you get a 1 or 2, you +2 him, and you make 2 squirrels tokens with haste. And a 3, you minus, I believe it's 1. This card is so hard to read on a tiny screen, I'm sorry. Then you return a card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. For a 4 or 5, Comet deals damage equal to the number of loyalty counters on him to a creature or player, and then -2s. And then for 6, you I believe you +1 him, and you can activate his loyalty abilities 2 more times this turn. I've been really surprised at how much I like this Planeswalker. Randomness is honestly kind of a key factor on this one. Every single one of the abilities feel good. Comet never feels like you're screwing yourself. You're always getting something valuable off of them. None of these abilities are targeted enough where you feel like you really need that one. You really just want a lot of the good ones. And the die rolling interactions have been all over the place this year between Unfinity and Baldur's Gate. So he interacts really well with cards printed in 2022. And that landing the 6 feels amazing. Comet's really hard to get rid of because he sometimes creates blockers for himself. He removes threats. And sometimes he just grows a whole lot in a single turn. I'm a big fan of Comet. We have Halo Fountain next. This is an amazing payoff for go-wide decks. It is 2 and a white for an artifact. You can pay a white and tap it, and untap a tapped creature you control to create a 1/1 green and white citizen. 2 whites, tap, untap 2 creatures that are tapped that you control, draw a card, or 5 white, untap 15 tapped creatures you control, you win. Just straight up, you win. This card, like I said, incredible payoff for going wide. Getting to swing in with a whole bunch of dudes, even things like making tapped creatures or tapped attackers. Halo Fountain can win the game so unbelievably fast, and we got a whole bunch of token generation in Capenna. We got a decent chunk of it in Bro. We got a good token, several token decks in the 40k Commander decks. Halo Fountain interacts super well with all of those. Really cool card. All right, we have Hitotsugu Consumes All next. This is a saga, one of the flip sagas out of Kamigawa, in fact. It is 1 black and red for this enchantment saga that says on its 1, you destroy each non-land permanent that with mana value 1 or less. For 2, you can exile all graveyards, every single one of them. And then for 3, we flip Hitotsugu Commands All, which on the back gives us a Vessel of the All-Consuming. This is an enchantment creature, Ogre Shaman, trample 3/3. When it deals damage, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and if it has dealt 10 or more damage to a player this turn, once it deals damage to someone initially, they lose the game. It takes a little while to ramp up, but if you're in a deck where you can double damage, triple damage, anything like that, or give double strikes, just all of that nonsense, Vessel of the All-Consuming can kill a player so quickly. After already getting those 2 very nice effects on the front, which is wiping little things and exiling graveyards. All right, next we have In the Trenches. This is 1 white for an Anthem. It's an enchantment that just gives your dudes +1/+1, but for 6 mana, so 5 and a white, you can exile a non-land permanent you don't control until In the Trenches leaves the battlefield. This is only at sorcery speed, and this is some new tech Wizards has been playing with. Activate only once. So you get to do this one time. You get wipe one thing until In the Trenches leaves, but it just essentially says you only get to do this one time during this game. You cannot do it more. That is cheating. But I kind of like this. It's 1 mana more than I usually like to play for an Anthem effect, and I don't play a lot of Anthem effects in Commander, to be honest. But having removal stapled onto it makes this honestly quite an interesting card. All right, we have Jugen Defends the Temple next, which is another flip saga from Kamigawa. 2 and a green for that enchantment saga. For 1, you make a human monk with tap at a green. For 2, you put a 1/1 counter on up to 2 creatures, and then when it flips, you get my boy Remnant of the Rising Star. This is an enchantment creature, Dragon Spirit. Whoops, there we go. 2/2 flyer. When another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay X. If you do, put X 1/1 counters on that creature. As long as you have 5 or more modified creatures, Remnant of the Rising Star now gets +5/+5 and has trample. Remnant is phenomenal in counters decks. Great in, just green decks in general. But having extra mana lying around and turning that into pumping your board, and then pumping himself later and giving himself trample while he's already a flyer, super, super cool card. I'm a big, big fan of Jugan defending my temple. Next up, we have Karn's Sylex. This is 3 mana for Karn's version of the Sylex, rather than Urza's, which we will talk about in a little while. Alright, so Karn's Sylex is 3 mana. It's a legendary artifact. It enters tapped. It says players can't pay life to cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. For X tap and exiling your Sylex, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less at sorcery speed. The static effect is almost so good in some formats that you don't even want to use the board wipe sometimes, but the board wipe is really flexible and really great. A little slow, sorcery speed, you got to put some mana into it, but paying the right amount of mana just wipes that board right clear. I really like Karn's Sylex. I think this is an interesting little hate piece that later turns itself into a board clear when you need it to be. Next up, we have probably the silliest card on this list. It's not like a funny card, but it's just ridiculous. It's Legion Loyalty. This is 6 white for an enchantment that just says, creatures you control have Myriad. Every creature you control now attacks every opponent whenever you swing. This is such a headache for your opponents to try and handle. Once you resolve it, it's so powerful. I honestly never thought we'd see an effect like this, and as soon as we saw Myriad showing up in Baldur's Gate, I was like quietly crossing my fingers hoping this would show up. It's big, it's flashy, this is Battlecruiser magic at its finest, and it makes your deck insane if you can land it on the right kind of board. Alright, next up we have an equipment, Luxior, Giada's Gift out of Capenna. 1 mana for a legendary equipment. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter that's already on it. The equipped creature isn't a planeswalker and it is a creature in addition to its other types, but its loyalty abilities can still be activated. You can equip it regularly for 3 or to a planeswalker for 1. So this basically turns your planeswalkers from a planeswalker to a creature, pumps them up for every loyalty ability, still lets you activate their loyalty abilities, but now they can't be attacked directly and are a creature still, and are probably huge. This card is really amusing, it's really fun, and also, hey Devoted Druid, another Infinite Devoted Druid. We got a lot of those this year. Crazy card. And the reason it goes infinite with Devoted Druid, for anybody who doesn't know, Devoted Druid puts a -1/-1 counter on itself to untap itself to make a green mana. Well, Luxior says it gets a +1 for each, just any kind of counter on it, so they -1/-1 from the counter is canceled out by +1/+1 from Luxior. The counters don't go away, so if somebody removes Luxior, Devoted Druid does die, but you can always just continue activating it, even if somebody puts something on the stack here. Alright, we have Ob Nixilis, the Adversary, next. This is another Planeswalker. It's 1 black and red, comes in with 3 loyalty, and it has Casualty X. The copy isn't legendary and has starting loyalty X. So when you cast it, you can sacrifice any creature with power X. So this defines your X. When you do copy this spell, the copy becomes a token. So Obnix comes in, you sacrifice any creature on your board that you like, and then you get an Obnix list that isn't legendary that has starting loyalty equal to the power that you sacked. So you automatically get your 3 loyalty one. You can +1 them to have each opponent lose a life, unless they discard a card. Then, if you control a demon or devil, you gain 2 life. -2 gets you 2 red devils. They're 1/1s each, and when they die, it pings any target for 1. And -7, target player draws 7 cards and loses 7 life. The fact that if you've got some 7 or higher loyalty creature, or power creature on the board, cast Ob Nixilis for 3 mana, sack that thing, and boom, you got yourself a free draw 7, lose 7. Ob Nixilis is super cool. I see this actually being super playable in Commanders compared to some other cards that we've seen recently. Really, really awesome guy. Alright, we got Pirated Copy next. It's 4 and a blue for a Shapeshifter Pirate. It's a 0/0 normally, but you can have it enter as a copy of any creature, except it's a pirate. And it has, when this creature or another creature with the same name deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. This means that if you copy one of your opponent's cards, and they swing at literally anybody, including you, and you take damage or they take damage, you're still drawing a card. Super weird. It's very unique. Rather overcosted at 5 mana, but that draw effect is certainly something, especially if you choose to copy like a generic token with, like, you know, that your opponents are making lots of. Say I'm playing my Jenny Fey deck, you drop this and you copy one of my cats. Every time I swing with the cat, you're drawing a whole bunch of cards. Pretty cool. I'm not sure the mana investment is worth it, but I'm really interested in it regardless. It's a cool card. We have Platoon Dispenser next. 5 mana, 4/6 artifact construct creature. At the beginning of each end step, or your end step, sorry, that would be crazy if it was each end step. Your end step, if you have 2 or more other creatures on the board, draw a card. For 3 and a white, you make a soldier, and you can unearth it for 2 white. The unearth is almost definitely going to be come back and draw a card because you control 2 other creatures. But if you happen to have enough mana to also create the soldier when it comes back in, why not? It's a nice creature generator stapled to an easy-to-access card bonus. Unearth is just nice. It's extra. Portal to Phyrexia is our next card. This is a 9-mana artifact. Don't cast this in EDH. 9 mana is a lot. You want to be cheating this back out of your graveyard. And when you do, when it enters, each opponent sacks 3 creatures. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a target creature from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexia in addition to its other types. This card is super impactful because there are so many good ways to sneak this back out of your grave. And if you can, you're getting a significant power boost because across your 3 opponents, they are sacrificing 9 total creatures at most. Then every upkeep, on every one of your upkeeps, you get a free dude back out of your grave. Oh, sorry, out of a graveyard. This card is bonkers. If you are in an artifact deck, especially one usually in red that can sneak artifacts back out of your graveyard for low cost, Portal to Phyrexia is insane. Really crazy card. There's a reason it's going for 25, 26. It is super good, not even just in EDH, but I also think it's great for Commander too. We have Rootpath Purifier next. This is a card just out of the Brothers War like set boosters. It's the Commander set, but not really. Anyway, 3 and a green for a 3/4 Elf Druid. Lands you control and land cards in your library are basic. Ya basic. I'm not the first person to make that joke, but that's okay. But this is the most unique rules text I think we've seen all year. Fascinating effect for green ramp decks, and it certainly opens up a different way to play your ramp spells. I don't think this is like insanely broken or anything. I actually think the price tag that it's holding right now of about $22 for this extended art is too high. It's not your commander. It's in the 99 of your deck. And yes, green can tutor really well, but like, is it worth it to turn your Cultivate into grabbing a Gaia's Cradle? Yeah, probably. But like, I don't know. It's really unique. It's really weird. I haven't gotten a chance to test this card out yet, but it fascinates me. There's a lot of possibilities with this card, and I think the ceiling is incredibly, incredibly high, even if the floor is pretty low and you're just grabbing a few like duels or something. Still, I really, really like the Purifier. It intrigues me. Let me know how it's been going for you. I'm really curious to hear. We got Sarenth Great Worm next for red-green for a 7/6 worm with trample. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, make a tapped Power Stone token. Any land entering the battlefield, your opponent's, your own, somebody cracking a fetch land to get a new land, anytime anybody plays a land, for any reason, onto that battlefield, you make a Power Stone. Yes, we're in red-green here. Red-green does not have as great use for Power Stones, but red-green also has a lot of activated abilities, which gives new life to these Power Stone tokens. I am going to be trying this card out in that Grand Warlord Rada deck that I mentioned, because the deck has a lot of activated abilities to try and drain out some of that excess mana that I'm making. Being able to take, 4 extra turns with Aggravated Assault instead of just 1 or 2. A lot of extra combat steps right there. Great Worm just generates a lot of use, and the fact that they come in tapped is certainly a downside, but it helps curb the power level of this card a little bit, and I appreciate that. We have Sarah Paragon next. 2 white for a Flying Angel 3/4. Once during each of your turns, you can play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell from your graveyard with mana value 3 or less. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it and gain 2 life. This card is like a bigger version of Lurrus, kind of. It's really amazingly powerful. It's got great recursion tools. And while the card gets exiled again after it goes away, you're getting some free life off of it too, so I mean, it really doesn't hurt. And just being able to recur your fetch lands one time, offset that life cost a little bit, is certainly pretty cool. I like the Sarah Paragon a lot. We're going to do Silverback Elder next. This is 2 green for a 5/7/8 shaman. Whenever you cast a creature spell, not when a creature enters, whenever you cast one, you can destroy an artifact or enchantment. You can look at your top 5 and put a land among them onto the battlefield tapped, shove the rest on the bottom randomly, or gain 4 life. Super flexible variety of effects. If you're playing a creature-heavy green deck, like Green Stompy, like I do in Commander with Goreclaw, Silverback Elder is phenomenal. Super excellent series of effects. I really like what this card does and what it offers. Next up, we have Space Bellerin. This is the other Planeswalker out of Unfinity. Super funny card. It's 2 white-blue for a 3 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Jace. It has a static ability called Space Sculptor. It says, when Space Bellerin divides the battlefield into alpha, beta, and gamma sectors. If a creature isn't assigned to a sector, its controller assigns it to one. Your opponents assign first. So basically, everybody splits their board into kind of 3 columns, I guess is the best way to describe it. Little sectors. And then nothing else really happens yet. Jace's abilities are actually going to interact with those sectors. So this isn't something as silly as like Raging Ravine, where you got to split them into 2 groups and then always can only interact. This is just simply they sit in their sectors, and then until you use Jace's loyalty abilities, things aren't really going to happen. But what I do like about it is the fact that when a creature isn't assigned, when it enters, it joins one. So as long as Jace is out, everything gets to be in its own little space sector. Now, Jace's +1 is creatures in each sector can only be blocked this turn only by creatures in the same sector. Now, because your opponents have selected first, this gives you a lot of flexibility by assigning your creatures where you feel they would be most powerful. And then it kind of becomes a mini-game after that, where every time somebody plays a new creature, they have to kind of figure out which sector is going to be most valuable for them. And this is just, I think it's fun, I think it's difficult, and it creates a really interesting game interaction. His -1 is put a +1/+1 counter on each creature in the sector of your choice. That includes your opponent's stuff. So, again, strategic decisions on your part about which sector you really want to try and handle, and which one is worth getting bigger. And then finally, his -5, destroy all creatures in the sector of your choice. So something really interesting you can do with this is just leave an empty sector. You know, if you don't want your creatures messed with in a specific sector, don't put any there. And then you have the ability to wipe that sector if your opponents put a lot of resources into that sector. Yeah, it's cool. Sector has lost meaning as a word to me now because I've said it so many times. But this card is just ridiculous. It's wild. I cannot believe it works in the rules, but it does. It's a headache in like an interesting way, I think. And I really think Space Bellerin is just a fascinating Magic card that creates some really, really unique gameplay. All right, we have another Planeswalker next, and we're not even done with Planeswalkers yet, let me tell you. You get Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim, 3 blue, for a legendary Teferi with 4 starting loyalty. Whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on. 0, draw a card. -2, make a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 on that creature. And then -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to their hand. Then they shuffle all of their non-land permanents into their owner's library. I play this in my Min Wily Illusionist deck, which is all about drawing a whole lot of cards. I have -12 Teferi 3 times in a single game. It's ridiculous. He's so good. He's so hard to get rid of, because somebody can swing at him with what seems to be lethal, and then just a single instant can bump him up 3 loyalties super easily. Lots of triggered effects can bump him up really easily too. He's really slippery. He's really hard to get rid of. and he's incredibly powerful. All three of those abilities are certainly worth activating. Something as simple as drawing a card is nice, but also just giving yourself dudes that get bigger every time you draw is nice. And then just, casually shuffle board wiping is phenomenal. We have Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh next, 2 blue for a legendary Tezzeret. 4 mana. The first activated ability of an artifact you activate each turn costs 2 less. +1, draw 2, discard 2 unless you discard an artifact. -2, an artifact becomes an artifact creature. If it's not a vehicle, it has base power and toughness 4/4. -6, you get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control becomes tapped, draw a card. All three of those loyalty abilities are great. That ultimate is really easily within reach, just 2 turn cycles. Really solid. That cost reduction on the first activated ability of an artifact is really cool too, though just be cautious when you're using it. Don't tap your mana rocks to activate an ability of your artifacts, because that's an activated ability of an artifact. So be on the watch for that. But if you can make use of his static effect well, this card's already awesome, and the other loyalty abilities are just kind of a nice little over-the-top piece. Next up, we have the Mana Rig, 3 mana legendary artifact. When you cast a multicolored spell, make a tapped Power Stone. For XXX and tapping your rig, look at the top X cards of your library, put up to 2 of them in your hand, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. This card basically just generates Power Stones for you passively just by playing multicolored spells, and then if you have enough mana to sink into that activated ability, you can draw a selection of up to 2 cards. Pretty solid little piece. I don't think it's incredible. You'd be surprised, but looking at a lot of commander decks, running actual multicolor cards is rarer than you might think. But it's still kind of nice, especially if your deck is very heavy multicolor. This can be a nice little draw engine for you. We have Timeless Lotus next. This is a 5 mana legendary artifact that enters tapped, but you can tap it to add Wooburg. That's it. Very simple. Phenomenal little Lotus. The fact you don't have to sacrifice it is kind of nice, as most Lotuses have to be sacrificed. But 5 mana for 5 mana, even if it enters tapped, is ridiculous. This is some of the best ramp we've ever seen printed on a rock like this. Whew, so good. And a very smart decision from Wizards to make this actually add Wooburg, because if they did not, this could go in way too many decks and get a lot of advantage. So this is smart. It's restricted to your 5-color decks, but it's very, very powerful there. We have, as I mentioned earlier, Urza's Silex next. This is not Karn's. This is the OG 3-mana legendary artifact. For 2 white, tapping and exiling your Urza's Silex, each player chooses 6 lands they control and then destroys all other permanents only at sorcery speed. So 6 lands that they want to keep, and then everything else is gone, including their other lands. And then when the Silex is put into exile from the battlefield, you can pay 2 mana. If you do, search your library for a Planeswalker, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. Second ability is less impactful, I think, but I kind of love the fact that the activated ability costs 4. You keep 6 lands, so you can keep 2 behind to use on that the triggered ability. And if you're playing Planeswalkers in your deck, I mean, it's card draw. Certainly card draw after a huge board wipe, and you can definitely get ahead that way. Give you a few turns to get your Planeswalker ticking up before your opponent can even interact with it. We have Vesuvan Duplimancy next. I kept calling this Diplomacy, but it's Duplimancy. This is Orvar, but on an enchantment. It's harder to interact with. So whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. It's not as good as Orvar. Bear in mind, this is 3 and a blue for an enchantment. It doesn't work on your lands. It doesn't work on your enchantments. Any non-artifact or creature off the table. Something that's really powerful about Orvar is that you can clone your lands and make tokens that way. But this card is still super, super great. Just targeting a single artifact or creature, and boom, there's an extra one. Boom, there's an extra one. Pops off really, really quickly. All right, couple more cards left. We got Vexing Puzzle Box next. 3-mana artifact. When you roll 1 or more dice, put that many charge counters on Puzzle Box for the result. When you roll 1 or more dice, put a number of charge counters on Vexing Puzzle Box equal to the result that you rolled. Tap, add a mana of any color, and roll a d20. So there you go. There's a way to get charges right there. Then you can tap it and remove 100 charge counters from your puzzle box. Search your library for an artifact and put it straight onto the battlefield and shuffle. This card is really great. It's a solid role player in dice rolling decks that eventually snags a big artifact for free, but you don't even really need to play it in your dice rolling decks. It's better there, but you don't have to play it there because it provides its own dice roll just by tapping it for mana. This is definitely one of the strongest 3-mana rocks I think we've seen in a while. This can go off in as little as 5 turns just by itself. Obviously, you're not going to roll 5 20s in a row, but you could. The odds are incredibly low, but you could. But if you have other dice rolling happening around your Vexing Puzzle Box, this thing is going to tick up really, really quickly, and you're going to get that free artifact of any power, any mana value, anything you want, for free, just, for rolling the dice, doing the thing that your deck might already have been doing. I am playing this in my Myra the Magnificent deck, which has a whole lot of dice rolling, and this thing ticks up unbelievably quickly and then gets me something big. Next up, we have our final Planeswalker of the list, Vivian on the Hunt. This is also some of my favorite art of the year, which is why I selected this version for the video. She is 4 green for a 4 loyalty Vivian Planeswalker. You can +2 and basically Birthing Pod. You sack a creature, search your library for a creature with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's mana value, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. So Vivian on the Hunt is just crazy with that ability on its own. Like, yes, it has another +1. Mill 5 cards, put a number of creature cards milled this way into your hand, so there's some card draw there. -1, make a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior. Yeah, that's cool. The +2 is what we're here for. So you +2, and this basically plays Birthing Pod for you. It's almost about the same as getting your Birthing Pod out and activating it on the mana, but in one big chunk. And then there are an easy, super silly infinite combo using Felidar Guardian into a Karmic Guide and a Kiki Jiki. So you get a Felidar Guardian out using that +2, sacrificing anything that's, I believe it's 3. Go get a Felidar, flicker your Vivian, which means you can then +2 again. You sack your Felidar to get Karmic. Karmic comes back, you get Felidar back. You flicker Vivian, you sacrifice the Karmic, you go get Kiki Jiki, activate Kiki Jiki with your Felidar to make infinite Felidar Guardians with haste and win the game. Really compact piece. You just need to start with Vivian and something small enough that you can +2 and go get Felidar Guardian, and then you just kind of win the game right there. Crazy powerful. I play this combo in my Ginny Fae deck. It doesn't happen a whole lot, but when it does, it sure is entertaining. And then our very last card we're going to talk about for 2022's best cards is Weatherlight Completed. This is a 2-mana legendary artifact. It is a vehicle, so when it's crewed, or I guess when it's a creature, it's a 5/5, and I say that because this card does not have crew, but it does have flying, and as long as it has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. So eventually it turns into a 5/5 after it gets 4 of those counters. Now, how do we get those counters? Whenever a creature you control dies, put one of those counters on Weatherlight Completed, then draw a card if it has 7 or more Phyresis counters on it. If it doesn't, scry 1. I'm currently testing this out in my Charade deck, which is an Aristocrats deck that sacrifices a whole lot of creatures, as a way to get some incidental scry, get myself a big flyer, honestly pretty quickly, but then also just be a really powerful draw engine. Alright, thank you so very much for watching this video and watching, hopefully, the rest of the videos on this list. This has been my favorite Mythics of 2022. This series has been my favorite cards of 2022, the cards that I believe are the most powerful, cards that I believe are the most interesting and relevant to Commander in 2022. So I hope you enjoyed. I will hopefully be trying to record some more videos in the near future because I definitely have not been as active on this channel as Ryan has. Hope you've been enjoying his deck techs. I've been doing a lot of brewing recently and just haven't had the time to sit down and record some stuff. So hopefully I will have a few deck techs rolling your way. Currently in the middle of getting together this beautiful Rodolph the Duskbringer build. Pretty powerful. Deck isn't fully assembled yet. I got a chunk of sleeves to get handled, but then we got a bunch of cards here ready to go. This is a Reanimator deck, and hopefully I'll have something related to that once I get this thing all put together. So thank you again very much for watching. Happy New Year, because I'm recording this in January, and I hope you enjoy. Bye.